In this session, I want to talk about system protection jobs within BackupAssist, how best to use them, how they work, some of the key features about them that you might not be aware of. So we'll start by looking at system protection settings. So the first window is where you choose what you want to back up. You'll notice in here that we've got applications. For example, this is running on a Hyper-V server on 2016. So you've got the Hyper-V application, which you can select to back up all of the VMs, or you can select specific VMs to back up individually. It's worth noting when you do want to just back up particular VMs, then you need to be running the copy VSS mode. Full VSS mode will back up everything under a VSS application, everything it's looking after, in this case all of the VMs. You can also choose to back up critical volumes, which is where you would do a bare metal type backup and recovery. Bare metal is, well, system protection, I should say, is the only method you can use if you want to do a true bare metal disaster recovery type backup. And that will include all drives that are needed for Windows to boot. You can include other drives within your bare metal, but bear in mind that that means you're backing up a lot more data, and it might sometimes be beneficial to have more than one backup to do that. One that's dedicated to bare metal and maybe another one that's dedicated to your data drives. You have the option. There's also the ability to back up other backup volumes. So sometimes you might be backing up backups that have been taken with other jobs, including them there. And you'll also see any other applications on the server. In this case, we've got MailStore, which is a VSS capable application. And that will show up individually, and you can select the whole application, and it will back up everything within MailStore. But the important bit is, as a VSS application, it's going to instruct that application to prepare that data ready for backup. So in the case of MailStore, it's got lots of databases. Those databases need to pause their writes in order for the backup to be successful and be a clean, consistent snapshot. So in this example, we'll just back up some basic data. So we'll leave it backing up this MailStore server. Next, you need to choose the destination, and system protection jobs will only support backup media that's based on hard drive technologies. This is typically going to be removable media like USB hard drives or RDX cartridges that behave very similar to USB hard drives but not identical. But you can also back up to local drive locations, so paths on local disks, network locations, so shares on Windows servers or NAS devices, and also iSCSI targets, so virtual network hard drives that can again be on Windows servers or NAS devices. When you're backing up to USB media, that's a local rotating media, so you may have one or more disks you're backing up to. That is one of the options that supports BitLocker encryption. So you can use BitLocker if you want to encrypt that data and make it safe off-site. When you're using BitLocker, it also requires that you have a USB pen drive that stores the encryption keys. BackupAssist itself doesn't keep the password stored within the software. It uses the password to encrypt the data, but then it needs the key to remount the data and back up to an encrypted volume. RDX drives, I mentioned they're not exactly the same as USB hard drives. They actually behave in a slightly different way. They're more like optical media in that respect. In order for them to back up in the same way as a USB hard drive and support fundamentally the ability to do differential updating of the data, you need to use the data container option. This creates a virtual backup hard drive within the RDX drive that then gets mounted and it backs up to that media. That's why that option's on by default, but just make sure you keep that option on if you're using RDX drives. When you're running a system protection job, you're utilizing the Windows imaging engine, and this imaging engine has two modes of operation. To local media, so USB hard drives, RDX drives with the data container, and local hard drive destinations. In fact, also iSCSI targets for that matter, that supports incremental updating. What that means is after the first initial backup, where it stores an image of the source data you're backing up, the next backup to that same media isn't a full backup. It doesn't have to copy all of the data again. It only has to copy the bits of the blocks of the disks that have changed since the previous backup. Now that means two things. Your backup's going to run a lot quicker because it's only moving the data and only looking at the data that's changed, but it also means that it only has to store the changed data. Without that option, it would effectively mean that you'd only fit as one backup. If the backup destination is the same size as the source, you might just fit one backup. You wouldn't fit any more. If the backup destination is twice the size of the source data, you'd only fit one, possibly two backups. When you've got a destination that supports this differential update, you might get 10, 15, 20 revisions on that destination. Now, it's very important that your backup destination is correctly sized, and the recommended minimum size is 2.5 times the source data. This is a recommendation that Microsoft have put into the Windows imaging engine, which is what BackupAssist is using in this scenario. So typically, if you're backing up a USB hard drive that's 100 gigabytes, you need at least really, a 300 gigabyte destination. In an ideal world, you want to go 4 or 5, times more, and then you'll have plenty of space for revisions. So in this example, we'll choose a USB hard drive, and we'll choose that we're going to use BitLocker encryption and go on to the next stage. So now we choose the different backup scheme that we want to use. The scheme is really all about how you rotate the media. So in our example, I'm going to suggest that we've got 5 USB hard drives and we want to swap them every day. Very standard sort of rotation scheme, and the basic daily rotating will do that. You can see it's showing you've got n amount of drives and each one has n amount of backups, so that's fine. If you want to have more history in your backups, bear in mind if you're creating a new backup every day and you can only fit 10 backups on the drive across 5 drives, you've only ever got a retention of about 50 days. That may be fine, but in a lot of scenarios, customers want to have retention that goes back weeks, months, possibly even years, so you can go back to a much older backup. Then you need to choose one of the schemes that have got more history. So for example, if we choose daily, weekly and monthly rotating, then we've got a pool of daily drives, a pool of weekly drives and a pool of monthly drives. The daily drives might rotate every day other than a Friday, and then every Friday we put a weekly drive in, and then maybe every last day of the month or first day of the month we have a monthly drive. So therefore, if we ever need a very old backup, we can look in the weekly drive, and that might go back several weeks, maybe months worth of backups, and the monthly drives can potentially go back years worth of backups. So you choose a scheme that best suits the retention that you need for your backups. There is a custom scheme I won't go into right now, but that's a very flexible scheme where you can choose specific numbers of daily rotation and exactly when you want to rotate them. And if you've got a really specific requirement, have a look in the custom scheme for more details. Most of the time we find that a daily rotating, where you just have a daily backup and you change the disk every day and keep as many backups on the drive, suits quite a lot of people, so it's a good starting point. Once we've chosen our schedule, then we need to choose the destination and where we're actually going to back up data to. So you'd select the drive letter here for the actual hard drive that you're backing up to, and in the case of a BitLocker volume, because we've chosen to encrypt the data, we have to select the drive where the encryption key exists. We also need to give the backup a password so that the encryption can be created. Now, like I mentioned before, that password has to be used if you're ever going to manually restore the data. We need to define how many backups we're going to use. How many backup media we have in the pool. So in our case, 5 devices. We can then define notifications. Notifications are the ability to email one or more people when the backup has completed, whether it's successful or it's errored. And also you can send a notification to say when the backup media needs to be changed, which is actually very useful if you've got an office environment where somebody's role is to go and just plug in a new media. It's nice to get a notification during the day to say please go and change it. I need the Wednesday drive this time. So you can enable these options here. The actual email addresses that are used, often you notice it, I've already pre-configured one here. They're configured in the email access list at the top. So you can add as many addresses as you want here and choose whether you want to send those emails as HTML or plain text. Once they're listed there, they can be selected down here in the notification. So in this example, I'm going to send email reports to that address, and I could also decide to send an email report to potentially another address under whether it's just errors only. Once we set up our notifications, the next stage is to prepare the media. Now, preparing of the media does two simple steps. The first one is to label the media digitally. It's not the actual Windows name of the drive here. This is more the fact that it's creating a file on the root of the drive that's a unique identifier that BackupAssist can recognize. So it knows which drive is plugged in at which time. In the case of the BitLocker encryption, there's a second stage where it's actually going to re-encrypt prepare the drive for encryption. Now, if you ever get this message that media is already prepared, that's telling me that the drive that's already in place has already been used with BackupAssist, and it's warning me that if you prepare it now, you're potentially going to overwrite a job. In this case, it has. I've already used this drive, so I'm going to overwrite and re-prepare it for this new job. If I wanted to, it's possible to share a drive between jobs, but we tend to not recommend that, as it can, in some cases, cause confusion, whereas space gets used up. Certain data can not be deleted because it's not relevant to the job in question. So, tend to recommend stick to one job, one backup media. So I'll just overwrite the prepare information. Take a little bit of time to just run through that. Okay, so that's been prepared. Now, at this stage, I've just prepared drive 1. If I had 5 drives, which I will have, I'd now unplug drive 1, plug in drive 2, and prepare drive 2 there, and carry on with that process. We don't recommend plugging in more than one drive at a time. If you do that, you can find that you can have problems in the future with it not recognizing the correct disk. So always stick to one drive at a time. Final stage is to name the job. It's always a good idea to name the job something that's meaningful. When you get these reports, it's nice to know if you've got more than one job. And BackupAssist is designed to have many jobs. You don't have to just have one backup job. There could be a whole range of different jobs. You want to give them a name that makes sense. So, mail store data image. You can give it a description as well to give even more information. I'll finish that job. So in a second, there we go. So there's our new job. I have another job already set up here running in the background. It's sometimes worth going in and editing that job, even though we've run through a setup wizard. There are a few other features within the job itself that it's useful to know, and it can help make things a bit more understandable. So basic overview settings, all as you'd expect. Something that I always like to do is go into the calendar, have a look at how the calendar is configured. Now, straight away, this may look a bit empty, and that's because, as it happens, it's almost at the end of September, it's the 29th, so I'm only going to see information for jobs that are about to run in the future. So if I go on a month to October, things look a little bit more logical now. Now, the first thing that stands out is that you can see that the days, the job, it's starting on daily 2, 3, 4, 5, and then going back to 1. Now, I often get this issue, and people ask, well, why is that the case? And this is fundamentally because BackupAssist always starts the job today. So as it happens, it's a Friday, and daily 1 is going to become Friday. Most people would prefer that to be that Monday's the first daily 1 and it rotates. Technically speaking, it doesn't actually matter, but it just makes a lot more sense that daily 1 is on the first day of the week. So to change that, we go into destination, number of disks in your backup pool. That's where you define obviously the number of disks, but there's also this option to start the first week of backups on this date. Now you can see it's currently set to today, then the 29th. If I make that any Monday, and if I go back to the previous Monday, that's the easiest one to choose, apply those changes. I'll ignore the fact that I've not changed the password at the moment, and then go look at the calendar. Now you can see that that's now lined up correctly for the previous month as if it ran last week. And if I look again in the future, it's going to be again daily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lined up correctly. So that's something that you often need to do if you're not happen to be setting up a job on a Monday. Another thing that customers often ask me is, how can I change it from not being daily 1 to daily 5? I want it to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And you can do that with the schedule. You can customize the labeling of the schedule here. See, the media label is set up as daily. So, you know, I can do Monday. I'll set up a couple now quickly. Oops. Tuesday and etc. And I could go through and name those all, name all of those rather. Go back into my calendar, and now you can see the two that I've changed have relabeled to Monday and Tuesday. So that helps, especially with things like the notifications, because the emails are going to say please enter disk Monday today or disk Tuesday today. Sometimes people don't like the fact that it says daily 3 and they wonder, well, what daily you want, which one is that? I might forget which one I need to enter. It's obvious when it's the day of the week. Another thing to know is under the imaging options, there's a sub option down here. If I scroll down, shadow protection shadow copy protection mode. Now the shadow copy protection is all to do with the backup history. The way BackupAssist keeps history on the backup media, previous backups I'm talking about here, is that it uses VSS, Microsoft VSS shadow copies. So before a backup runs to the media, it creates a shadow copy so that any data that's overwritten, which is effectively what it's doing, it's updating the one single backup. The previous version of that data, the previous view of that image of the drive, gets pushed into a shadow copy. And that shadow copy only stores the differential changes that you're overwriting. Over time, the next time the backup runs to that same media, another new shadow copy is created, and you get this sort of reverse differential chain of previous versions of that source media. Those are stored as standard Microsoft shadow copies on the destination. In certain scenarios where there's hard drive corruption or there's been a major problem during the backup, it is possible that the backup destination can get corrupted in such a way that it loses this relationship between the current backup and the previous shadowed copies. And that can result in you losing all of your backup history. To protect against that one scenario, there is a sub option to use shadow copy protection mode. Now this has a downside, and the downside is it needs a bit of space reserved on the destination to do this function. So if you've got a very small destination, then you might worry about running out of space for backup history. If your destination's got a bit of space, and we're talking here about 12 to 15% of the drive dedicated to this function, it's well worth putting this feature on. And what this does is it effectively uses this allocated space as a sort of temporary cache for writing the shadow copy to. So in the event of an issue, it isn't necessarily going to affect your previous chain of backups. So yeah, we do recommend turning that feature on. And typically the default of 12% or even as low as 10% is usually enough to help with the problem. It doesn't fix the underlying issue of the data getting or the drive destination getting corrupted. It just means you don't potentially lose your backup history, which is very important. It's sometimes if your backups fail, the last thing you want to know at that point is you've also lost all of the last week's backup or the last set of Monday backups. At that point, you want to just run the backup to a new media that's working. So once we're happy that the job is all set up as we need, then we can simply run it from the Run menu and watch it in the Monitor tab.